The term cisgender isn't offensive, correct? I hate being called right-handed, it really grinds my gears. Why is this happening to us normal people? We didn't need a name for ourselves until a cabal of radical, left-handed intellectuals decided to impose their brand new naming convention upon us. Where will this end, I ask you? The people that would get offended at the use of cisgender are usually just offended at the concept of transsexuality and gender fluidity as a whole. In the context of discussing trans issues, sure, not offensive, but in the same way I wouldn't introduce someone as my trans friend or whatever, I wouldn't introduce someone as cis, not offensive exactly, just unnecessary. I don't get offended by it, but am also very unlikely to engage with a person who insists on referring to me as cis. A lot of people sure do seem to find it objectionable. You can't choose what people will or won't find offensive for them. My rule of thumb is that if I know that there's a significant group of people who find a term offensive, I'm not going to use it even if I don't understand what the problem is or see much wrong with it. Cis does fall into that category for me. I know it's likely to wind people up, so I don't use it. I really don't care if it's actually offensive or not. I just can't be bothered with unnecessary drama. Depends who is being asked. One can take offense to damn near anything while another is hardly ever offended. I don't get the argument that just because cis is a scientific term that it's not offensive. Gay people have been offended at being called homos for decades. Calling cisgendered people cis or sissy is pretty much the same thing. I've had the term white cisgender male spoken towards me as something derogatory. Like I've had things I've said, reasonable things, disregarded by someone arguing with me as their reasoning for why I'm wrong. By default you're just a cis white male, so you're clueless. I don't see how that is relevant to what I am saying. If you would read what I said and consider it, you might change your mind. Maybe I need someone who is not cis and not white and not male to say the things I said to get you to listen. I'm about to hire a minority who fits the bill to speak for me. Society functioned for thousands of years without the term. Trans people make up far less than one of society, but they decided they would feel better if the majority started using a new word, so they wouldn't feel weird. Same as posting your pronouns. I'm not going to use cisgender or post my pronouns. I've never had an issue where someone mistakenly thought I was trans or the wrong gender. I'm not saying I'm offended by it, but I kinda get it. Some group of people you don't identify with suddenly comes up with some term to describe who you are. I can see how people cannot like that. I do not get offended by it, but I do not like it. Just more bullshit insanity from the mentally ill puppets people have become. They can use whatever term they want, keep in mind that I will as well. Calling someone a cisgender or a transgender typically is done, so in a way that is very much offensive. It's a lot different than describing someone as a cis person or trans person when it actually has to do with the context. That word is completely unnecessary. I rather say I'm a straight guy. Cisgender sounds silly to me and most people I know. It's not offensive. It's just a sciencey sounding term that wasn't part of common conversation for a long time. I'm a woman. I'm not relabeling myself or anyone. Offensive just means that people take offense. Generally, people don't like being labeled something they don't believe in, but the people who don't believe in the whole gender theory are unlikely to get offended at a label. One thing that I think hasn't been brought up yet is that cisgender is mostly used in a negative context. We see stuff like white cis straight men in Congress doing X all the time. However, each other word in that sentence has been used for forever, and is less likely to have a negative reaction. We have sort of tacked on the word cisgender, which isn't used very commonly outside of a critique of how society treats trans people, and it isn't used commonly due to the fact that trans people are a very small part of the population. Even a trans ally may find themselves slightly peeved at being labeled cis when cis is generally used to talk about the cis people standing in the way of trans rights. What exactly is the question? People can be offended by whatever they want. Whether or not we think it's valid doesn't make it less offensive to an individual. If someone calls my mom ugly, it really doesn't matter that the entire country might agree to. I still think it's offensive to say so. It's not meant to be. Somebody was looking for a word that meant the opposite of trans, and in Latin the prefix cis is close. I know cis and trans from the 70s when I learned about stereochemistry. I am not an isomer, I am a man. I feel no need to use it nor any offense regarding this term. I think people who are offended by it are silly, but I think people who think it's necessary are also silly. Saying I am a cisgender male is basically like saying I am a guy and am not trans. Just entirely unnecessary information that 99% of people would have assumed correctly anyway.